Well, thank you guys for joining us for our third session on accessibility for Lunch and Learn this spring. Today is part one of two for accessible course design, and we're excited to dive in with you. If you've been joining us over the last few weeks, there is Dr. Laura Thompson, an instructional designer here at Stanton, and then myself. I'm also an ID at the Stanton campus. You can find us at a couple different locations at times, and feel free to submit a ticket at any time to CCIT for support. If you don't mind in the chat, sharing where you're joining us from, what campus, what department, or what role you serve at the college. Great to see some familiar faces. I'll never tell. Oh, we know where Jason comes from. Alice is our head librarian here at Stanton. Yes, such a great resource. Jason's an ID at Dover, April's an ID at Wilmington, and Christina is joining us from CCIT at Wilmington as well. Thank you guys for joining us. So for this first little bit, we kind of want to recap what we've been discussing the last two sessions. We started with defining what is accessibility. And accessibility is essentially removing barriers so all students have equitable access to learning experiences. And accessibility benefits everyone. That was the big takeaway that we had over the last few sessions. Last time we met, we discussed WCAG. WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and these are essentially the standards that we are going to follow as an institution to ensure accessible course design and resources for our learners. It is not only beneficial for that inclusive design, but it is also the legal accessibility requirement at WCAG 2.1 level AA. There are four principles that we also kind of took a look at, which is POUR, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So when we are designing materials for our students, whether it is a document, a page in Brightspace, an announcement, or even an email, we do want to follow the POUR principles to make sure that all students can access the content regardless of any assistive technologies they may use, and that it is understandable by all of our learners. One of the awesome things that our department has kind of championed over the years is the what are the faculty five. So faculty five are 5 things that all of our faculty are empowered to do right away to ensure that their course materials are accessible for all of their students. The 5 we looked at last week are meaningful hyperlinks, documents and HTML pages, video captions, images and alt text, and evaluating third-party resources. I'm going to take you through a brief recap of what those 5 looked like in practice before we dive in today. So meaningful hyperlinks is not just saying click here. It is giving it context for what that link is going to do. We also we reviewed a video that used a screen reader to read a document. And when it came to a URL that was not descriptive, it read it out exactly as it's written, HTTPS:, and it was very long and lengthy. So one of the first faculty 5 is to use meaningful hyperlinks that are descriptive for our learners. The second bucket we looked at is some documents. We briefly explored accessibility in Google Docs as well as Microsoft Word. Both of these platforms do have extensions or assistance built in to check the accessibility of items. We're going to take a deeper dive into the accessibility features in those document platforms in the next accessible course design. But in Google, the extension is called Grackle. There's one for Docs and there's one for Slides. And in Microsoft, there is a built-in accessibility assistant. Now, for today's focus, we are going to dive deeply into D2L's Brightspace Accessibility Checker, which is what we use when we are building announcements or pages, assignments, whatever it might be in the HTML editor. We also discussed videos, and we'll take a deeper dive into this in a future lesson as well. And the videos are so important with the closed captioning. We watched a quick clip last week about the benefit of closed captioning for all of our learners, such as sitting in a library and wanting to review a video, or you're in a loud environment so you can read the captioning. These accessibility features really do benefit the entire landscape of our learners. We actually had a great discussion as a department over the last couple of days about images and alt text. So alt text is alternative text that displays or provides a screen reader with a description of what is being shown on an image. And we're going to demo a little bit of that today. And the final one of the faculty 5 is our third-party resources. So what that is where we want to use an outside platform or ed tech tool, but we still need to ensure that it's accessible for our students before we just choose to use it. So the one showing on the screen is through ThingLink. ThingLink is one of the awesome tools that we use here in CCIT and across the college. If you haven't already, we'll take a look at the ThingLink reference guide as well. But we do our due diligence. We want to take a look at these third-party resources and see if they have an accessibility statement, see what their limitations are, and if it is going to be best to use for our students to access the materials. So we'd like to ask, of those 5 items, those faculty 5, are there any components that you currently use in practice? Do you currently use meaningful hyperlinks? Do you check the accessibility of your documents and pages? Do you use video captions? Do you have alternate text for your images? And or do you evaluate third-party resources? Which ones do you currently do in practice?
I think we use most of them, at least to a little degree. There are certainly ways that we could learn to use some of them more effectively. But I think we have a good start.
Kathy, I love how you said that. And it's true. Accessibility, there's not a broad answer or specific answer to make everything perfectly accessible. It's more about that growth mindset, right? We have a good foundation, and then we're going to keep learning different ways to make it better. I think you said that perfectly, Kathy. I love that. I'll be honest, even in our department, we have these discussions quite regularly about accessibility, and we're constantly learning new things. So thank you for sharing out about that. Now, are there any of these that you would like to learn more about that maybe you don't feel incredibly confident in just yet?
So one of the things that I've noticed, and it's probably very minor, but when I've tried to put an image up and it asks for alt text, then instead of putting the image in, it seems to put the text in. Do you know? I don't know if you understand what I mean, but instead of putting the picture in, it puts the text in, and then you have to click on the text to get the image.
Oh, in Brightspace, is that where you're in,
Yes.
in D2L? We're actually going to demo that today, Kathy. And if we have time, you can definitely even share your screen to kind of show us what you're seeing so we can troubleshoot. I love that you brought that up. We're actually going to go a deep dive in that today.
Yeah. And a really dumb example. So I put a picture up for Martin Luther King Day that just said, happy day, the college is closed or something. And then when I went to do alt text, I wanted to say picture of Martin Luther King. But when I did that, then on the page, it says picture of Martin Luther King, which you had to click on to get the picture.
I would love to see your process. When we demonstrate this today, I will practice inserting an image so we can compare which way we're doing this, because it might be a file versus inserting an image. And I'll explain the difference on that when we dive deep into this today. So when we get to that part, Kathy, I'm going to call you out a little bit so we can work through it together. Okay. That's great. I love it. All right. So, in today's session, we are going to look at some of the accessibility principles in action and some helpful and unhelpful ways that they could be used. I'm going to do a tour of accessibility in Brightspace and use a few different tools to help you with things like the alt text. And then we'll wrap it up with the reflection and resources. So, all the things that we have available to you in our CCIT reference library, as well as additional resources that we're going to share throughout today's session. So Laura is going to do our first section, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi. All right. So what we are talking about in this part is we're going to, now that we've had all these conversations about accessibility and we've talked about different things that we need to do, we're actually going to talk about how do we apply all of that information and knowledge that we have now. And I'm going to give you more ideas or examples of how you apply it in theory, and then Jenna is going to show you how to do it in demo. So we've got a couple of things going on here. When we look at key accessibility principles that we want to keep in mind, you have these different things you want to be able to keep in mind because you're trying to help all of your students again. Remember, we want to keep all of our students in mind when we do this. The first thing we're trying to do is to provide alternative formats. So if you have an image, you're going to have alternative text. The way that Kathy was just describing it, you want to be able to have words that can describe what that image is for the unsighted individual, especially when it's instructionally essential to what you're teaching. You want to have captions for videos, again, for someone who can't hear the video, but also there might be a variety of reasons that they can't hear it. Some could be from hearing loss, but again, some could be in a loud environment, or they could be somewhere where they need to have it very quiet. And providing transcripts can also be helpful for several individuals. One, because people who aren't able to hear the video can then understand what happened in the video, but also those transcripts help our students who are second language learners, because now those words are written down somewhere in a way that they can actually get those words. Sometimes the captions go quickly. When we have a transcript, they can access those words, look up meanings, see what the cognates are in their native language. And it can really help individuals who are not just individuals who have a disability, but individuals who might have other barriers to learning as well. You want to make sure that the text is readable and that there's a good color contrast. Sometimes if we have a text that is a dark color on a dark background, individuals who need that higher contrast might not be able to see it. And I don't know about you, but even me with 50 plus eyeballs, I might need a higher color contrast as well to help me be able to see it. And then you want to use structured content. And what we mean by that is, do you remember back in the day when you needed to write outlines about everything? So we had headings at the top, or we had a title, we had headings, we had bullets that were there. The issue is we don't just want to have, and Jenna covered this last week also, we don't just want to have headings that are bigger and that's why it's a heading now, it's a title. We have a great thing that's provided to us now through the word processing programs. Can be Google, can be through the word suite, through creating a Word doc. You can designate information and say, this is a heading. This is another heading. You can designate that things are bulleted lists. So rather than just putting a little asterisk next to it, you can make sure that you've chosen in the formatting that there's bulleted text. The reason that's so important is because people who are using a screen reader, they might not get the visual cues that you would have if you had a big text or asterisk there. But when it's designated in the word processing program, their screen reader will tell them what you are doing and help them figure out the organization of the text to then help them understand better what you're trying to teach them and get that content. So this was something that I really loved having conversations with Jenna about these. When you pull up a video, and we're just going to talk about YouTube for a minute. When you pull up a video in YouTube, there often is the opportunity for captions. And you can see down in the little corner of this image, there's a little CC there for closed captioning. When you click on that little image up here in the top corner, you're going to see something that tells you about those captions that are there. YouTube has the ability to auto caption. So that's why you see here auto generated caption. The issue is that those are not, often they are not going to be written correctly. They'll lack capitalization or punctuation. And all of those things add meaning to the information that we're providing for that video. So you want to make sure that those captions are correct. When you click on that button, sometimes you'll be able to see English and it'll say manual. If that's correct, then the person or the entity who created that video took the time to upload captions. Now, they might not be absolutely perfect. We know that every once in a while there might be a mistake or something like that, but they will most likely be further along than the auto-generated ones. Although some auto-generations can do a good job, you would want to be able to double check those. So if you're using a YouTube video in your class, watch the captions. Make sure that they are good, that they're legible, that it still carries meaning in the captions. And if it doesn't, find a different video or make your own. You know, you are an expert in what you're talking about. And if you need help making your own, let us know at CCIT and we can help give you some tips. And you have a YouTube reference guide that Jenna just popped up into the chat for you. So you have lots of resources to be able to discover how to be able to use videos and captioning to help your students. So this, I really thought it was funny, and I don't know if you noticed the smile on my face or not when Kathy was talking about her alternative text, but look, we have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. right here. So I just thought that was really neat. She gets a gold star for the day, actually. We were talking about being able to be descriptive before. We want to make sure that our alt text is descriptive. It has to be concise, though. There are, in certain programs, there are limits for how long that alt text is. So you still want to make sure that you're very concise in how you describe it. The other thing that's interesting is that a screen reader is going to tell your audience already that that's an image. So you don't really have to say an image of. You can make it even shorter than that if you want to. It'll have some idea of, or it'll know that it's an image. Here's an example too, that it's helpful enough for the instruction that this is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Adding in the information that it's a black and white photo or that he's wearing a suit and tie is less essential information, unless there was something that was important that was a black and white photo. If your course is about photography and elements of being able to take a picture, or how the meaning of knowing that that's an older picture and that's why it's black and white, why that matters, then it may be good information to know this black and white photo. But otherwise, you have to really think about your alternative text and what text would you provide that supports why you think that image is important in the first place. Because it could be just for decoration. And there's nothing wrong with it being just for decoration. But if it's for educational purposes, you want to describe that in your alternative text. And Jenna popped in there a link also for Section 508's website that helps you think about, how do I create meaningful alternative text? And again, it is for meaning, not just for appearance. So if we look at the image, we want to think about the purpose. And for here, we're already thinking about that someone may have visual impairments. If we're describing, look at the blue, there's a blue button in this image instead of the next step button to continue the admission form, is more descriptive of what that button is than blue, because color may not be seen by the individual who is using your site. And when you insert an image into Brightspace, into D2L, you have the opportunity to mark it as decorative or to be able to provide that alternative text. If it is something that is purely decorative, it is okay to mark it as decorative. I had vacillated on this actually for a while. I was like, well, everyone should have the opportunity to know that even if I put that decorative image there, know what it was. But then I listened to screen readers, and there's so much information there, they really don't need to know that that there's a banner at the top of the screen if it's for purely visual purposes. If it's conveying meaning, we want the alternative text. If we really just provided it for interest or to kind of underline the words in the paragraph, then it's okay to mark it as decorative. Now, when we get to charts, graphs, and diagrams, this is just a little bit more complicated, but it still has the same tenets. So we want to think about what is the purpose of this chart, graph, or diagram. When we're thinking about this, for instance, we might want to describe important data trends or relationships or other parts of the image that would be highlighted by this information. So it really does depend upon our purpose. And we have a couple of examples here. So a helpful caption for this might include every bit of information that you see in this bar chart. For instance, that the bar chart is the event sales from Monday through Friday. And then you might even have to tell them, well, on Monday, ticket sales were $100, food sales were $58, or maybe it's not dollars, is it? It's amounts, yeah. And merchandise sales 75. We might have to tell every single bit of the information that is in that chart if we're expecting our students to do something with that information. So if we want them to create, to do some calculations, we need to provide that information for them. I have had instructors who'll say, but if I'm giving them the information there, then I'm giving it away. Well, if it's less of a purpose of, oh, I know when I follow this blue bar up on Tuesday, this one with the stripes on it. And oh, I do want you to notice, it's not just blue, it has stripes. The orange one is solid. And then there's a green one that has polka dots in it. That also helps people if they have color issues, but I just want to put that out there. Okay, so if I look at this one for Tuesday, and it's the stripy bar, and it goes up, and it has a 122 on there, number one, it already tells it what it is anyway. So being able to give that information to someone who is maybe sight impaired, it's how they can complete the task that is ultimately what my goal is. So we're trying to recognize what is our goal. Then here's another one though, that if we're thinking about what is our purpose, it starts out the same way. Bar chart of event sales from Monday through Friday, amounts for tickets, food, and merchandise. But now what we're talking about is just the trend that we see. There was a general decline, a slight decline from Monday to Wednesday, but then over the weekend or leading into the weekend on Thursday and Friday, we see a dramatic increase. Then maybe we're just describing the trends that we see in the data.
Laura, can I add to this one too?
Absolutely.
That oftentimes if there is a data chart or a graph like this, that you can always include a table with it to organize that, because screen readers can work through a properly formatted table to convey that same information. So you could take this graphic and turn it into a table as well to accompany it. So that was a great way that you explained those. Thank you for that.
I like that you said that also, because properly formatted means that you have designated where the headers are, for instance, or you designate where the descriptive words are that help them understand how the table is organized as well. And then if we wanted to provide this and just say it's an event sales graph that doesn't give me any information to do anything with this, and it makes it seem like it's probably almost decorative, we might as well have marked it as decorative then at that point, if we're not going to give them any useful information about the image.
And can I add one more thing? Sorry,
Absolutely.
Laura. Something I learned from Jen, our LMS admin here. She was going through a couple pages for me with different screen readers, and I am guilty of it in the past, putting things like, this is an image of, or the picture of, but the screen reader automatically says that phrase because of the image tag. So I don't need to put that in my description. I just need to describe the picture instead of identify that it's a picture as well. And I thought that was really eye-opening as I started to learn a little bit more about all of this together. Thanks, Laura.
So if we think about how we might work through this image to provide some alternative text, we want to make sure that we are giving the information that is in that screen. If our purpose is so that individuals, and this is something that's used in a business course, if our purpose is so that the individual who's looking at this image knows that reply, one of the reasons that you use it is you use it when you're responding to only to that sender. And you don't want to use it if your message is for everyone, versus reply all, which is for everyone, but don't use it if all you're saying is thanks, because not everyone needs to see that thanks. Or when is it appropriate to use forward? Your alternative text should provide the text that's on the screen or a very good approximation of it. And you can provide, if it's something really complicated, you can provide more information, as we said, in a table, an accessible table, or in an accordion that could open. There are a few different ways. We could talk about some other ways that you could provide more complicated text if you were running out of room or running out of the space to type. But we can go into that more deeply if it's really complicated. Do you have anything to add to this one, Jenna?
I think it also depends on if I see this image and I'm thinking, is this information conveyed anywhere else in the text? So maybe all of these were in the text already, and I just pulled it together to make a nice aesthetic graphic. I could mark it as decorative if the information is already portrayed in the content itself. So that would be a nice to have, not a must have kind of image at that point. Now, if this is the only image that or only way to convey these do's and don'ts, then absolutely I will need to have very specific alt text or choose to put it in a table or a bulleted list, a different way to have an accessible alternative. Okay.
Excellent. So now it's your turn. So take a look at this image and feel free to unmute or to type in the chat. What would you provide as alternative text for this image?
I think all the information is important.
Right. Yeah, that's a great call out. Kathy said all the information is important. So our alt text would have to include all of this information, right? I agree completely with you. There's no fluff in this. Sometimes if we see a flyer or something like that, there might be fluff involved by all means, but this didn't. I would have to say something like upcoming events for 2025, February 18th, using hyperskill to create simulations. March 4th, accessible course design part 2. March 18th, creating an inclusive classroom culture. Like I would have to go line by line for each of these items. That was awesome attention to detail, Kathy. Anything you want to add, Laura? I know I derailed and took over.
No, this is fabulous. And we do have another example. Now for this one, what would you provide for this one? Feel free to unmute. Oh, and I love it. Alice did type it all out too. She typed out that whole one for the last one. Thank you, Alice. And for this text, or for this image, what alt text would you provide for this one? Again, feel free to type or unmute. Go ahead, Kathy.
I think it would be, depending on the context the image is used for, it could be just decorative.
You get 2 gold stars today, Kathy.
And then Alice did put in there what we would type in if there was context, right? So we just gave an image. Depending on the context, we might need to have the alt text describing what is taking place. Or if it's just a filler, it's just a nice little graphic to break up some of the page, then we could mark it as decorative. So it really does depend on the context. And I know that's even a challenge for me sometimes to realize, does this matter to the students? Are they going to learn any more or any less if I include it or exclude it? That was a really good trick on that one. I like it.
And it's interesting because a couple of years ago, I think it was in the newsletter, I had put an article in about alternative text for an image as well. And it was an image of John and Yoko, right? John Lennon and Yoko Ono. And they were in a hotel room. And the idea was, and they had all the love and not war signs pasted to the window in this hotel room. So the idea would be, okay, what's the importance of this picture? I love how Kathy zeroed right in on that. What's the importance of the picture? Is the importance that John and Yoko were there to participate in peace and love, and that they were trying to continue that movement? Was it an advertisement for Hyatt Regency to say, look, we have the best thread counts, and because we do, John and Yoko Ono came here? You know, it depends on what the purpose is of that video and who is ultimately using it. So, and again, maybe it was just a decorative thing because we were creating some information, and that was something that we popped into it. So it's making sure you understand your purpose. I love this conversation. Now, we mentioned color contrast briefly, and we saw something last week about a gentleman who was having issues with color contrast, and it made it very difficult for him to know about upcoming events on campus because he couldn't read the poster that was provided. That's why it matters for people who are low vision, it matters, but it also can matter for color blindness. Really thinking about the colors that we use and not only using color to indicate importance, because some individuals can't see the color. There are color contrast checkers. We showed one last week with WebAIM contrast checker. Brightspace can also tell you that you need better color contrast. It's not as great at helping you know what to do about it yet, but the idea is really, it's saying, well, you have some orange on white and it's not a good enough color contrast. It doesn't mean that you can't use a dark orange, more of a sepia color or something like that. But if you're conveying meaning by having it be orange, recognize that your students who have low vision or color blindness might not be able to recognize the importance of what you're saying. So that's why we often include a check mark, or we'll include some other kind of indication, or we might bold the information or italicize it to help it stand out. Oh, and to back up to that, I do remember something that I saw recently. We want to use underline sparingly because underline is usually an indicator for a link. So we don't want to use an underline necessarily to emphasize something and make it more important, because it will often give that kind of indicator, a visual indicator, mind you, but that we think it's something we should be able to click on.
Can I add one more thing to that as well
Yeah.
about the color contrast? We discussed this last session as well about like even the highlighter. A screen reader doesn't read that out loud, so you don't want that to be the only way to convey meaning, just like you spoke about for color. So it's interesting to learn all these like different perspectives, and it really helps us kind of keep growing in the right direction.
And we did talk about this already with structured content. We kind of talked about it more in word processing through Google Docs or through Word Docs, but also when you're designing your D2L pages, your Brightspace pages, you can use an indicator that says that it's a heading 1, a heading 2. You choose that at the top corner of the editing, and Jen is going to kind of show you that. But the default is often it'll say paragraph up there. There's actually some choices under there so that you can designate it with the correct order of information that someone with a screen reader would be able to skip from heading 1 to heading 2 down into maybe heading 3. And it helps them navigate the information quickly, concisely, so they don't have to listen to everything on the screen. So it's very helpful.
All right. Thanks, Laura.
I'm going to hand it over to Jenna now because she's going to do some of these demos for us. Look, there's the paragraph. It's right there.
Right. I know. I'm excited. So we are going to take a look at, I would arguably call it a workflow of kind of how do we go through this process of everything we've chatted about. We know the faculty 5. We talk about these things quite frequently, but what does it look like in action? So I'm going to swap our screen share to take a look at a few of the items that we discussed today. So first things first is this is our CCIT homepage. If you've not visited there, highly recommend. We have referenced the CCIT reference library a few times throughout the last few sessions. And this library has a wide variety of resources for you and your students. So for example, we've talked about the digital accessibility reference guide. You're going to get that as well. We also mentioned today about the YouTube one. We've mentioned ThingLink and how accessible and great a tool it is for our students. So we have that link there as well. So feel free to poke around at our reference library when you have time. The other resource that I shared out in the chat earlier was from the Section 508 website. They have really great resources, and a lot of it is written in phenomenal plain language. It is easy to understand. They give great examples of what to do, what not to do. And that's why we pulled them exactly from here today, because it is really, really, really important. You'll find that there's a few other resources as well on the side, such as documents, presentations, spreadsheets. It's a great starting point because once again, we're not going to know everything right now. We're not. We're constantly learning, even as a department here. So stay curious and keep exploring is my biggest advice. So I'm going to take you through kind of my approach if I'm going to design a page in Brightspace and I want to ensure accessibility. So for today, I'm going to play in my sandbox and I'm going to create a brand new file. Shameless plug also in the reference library. If you are curious about the HTML templates and things I'm discussing today, we also have phenomenal resources, and our very own Jason has done a ton of great PD on HTML templates if you have some questions after this. So I'm going to create a file, and I'm always going to start by pulling out one of our templates. So I'm going to select a document template. And all the way at the bottom, I'm going to browse for one. It's located in our public files, and we are on the newest and greatest version 5. For today, I'm just going to pull up a basic content template, and I'm going to select a basic page. If you ever want to preview what the page looks like, you can select the hyperlink, but I know what this looks like, and it's a great starting point for me. So I'm going to add it. So this is just an awesome template to get me started. I can see up here, this blue text that says basic page is a heading 1. This green text that says easy editing using the HTML template editor is a heading 2. So it follows correct hierarchy of the headings. It will actually tell me if it's wrong. So for example, I'm going to change this to say 2. And this to change 1. And this little I is the accessibility checker. It will tell me that my headings are not being applied in sequential order. So there is a big part of that human component we have to accessibility, but then we also have some technology for some checks and balances. So I'm going to put things back the way they were. And to show you with the accessibility checker, I'm starting with no issues with accessibility. So say I'm designing a business class right now. In business, we're using a lot of resources from OpenStax, which is an open educational resources. We chatted about OERs in great detail in the fall. So if I want students to come read a section from OpenStax, there's a couple different ways I can do this. One way is say I want them to come read just this section. I can highlight that section, right-click, and select Copy Link to Highlight. And when I create the descriptive link in Brightspace, it's going to take students right to that section. I also could say just link to the overall book. So maybe I just want them to come to the regular book. That's okay too. And I could use the normal URL at the top. So I'm going to use an example. Let's say monetary policy, and I'm going to get the link. I'm working on my page, and I'm going to say something like, check out OpenStax section on monetary policy. There's a couple different ways that you can do descriptive links. We discussed last week about doing Control and K. So if I do that on my keyboard, it pops up this add a link section. So there is the text that will be displayed, and then I can paste in the link. There's another way that I could do it. I can just select insert quick link. And there is a URL. Maybe it's under quick link today. Why am I drawing a thing? Oh, here we go. It's
link. Link.
Yeah, it used to say URL. So I'm going to select link and I can do the same thing. So I can say monetary policy and insert my link there. So I still want to give context to it, right? I don't want to just drop links. I want to give an idea of where that link is going. So I gave some context to get them started that where it's going to go. So this is an example of a descriptive link. Not helpful link, not unhelpful like we looked at, would be just posting this because a screen reader would read it all out as https:// and it would go through the entire link. So think about the student experience, and using one of the faculty 5 is using descriptive links. Another example I want to show is about these images. So to insert an image in Brightspace, and Kathy, you'll have to chime in if I'm doing something different than you normally do. We're always going to want to use this icon of insert image. We don't want to use insert stuff. We want to use insert image. So I'm going to insert an image from my computer, and I have a file up on my other screen that I'm going to drop over. Now, this, I could choose the location, and Jason actually taught me this to try to stay organized with my files to put things in the correct area. And I'm playing in my fake unit 2. So I'm going to make a folder for unit 2. And I'm going to put that file nestled in there, that file management. From here, it's going to ask if I want alt text or if it's decorative. The image that I just selected is just a megaphone. It's just a fun little icon that I might want to use to break up some text on my page. So I'm going to mark it decorative. And you'll see my gigantic megaphone was pasted, and I can make it smaller and put it somewhere. But it's just decorative. It doesn't need text. The next image I'm going to use, I'm going to insert it first so you can see, and then we're going to talk about using the alt text for it. Once again, I'm going to put it in unit 2, and the alt text for right now, I'm just going to put testing because I want to be able to show you the image and the graphic. So this is a little graphic that I designed for one of the courses about the journey to financial literacy, okay? Now, depending on the context, this might be decorative or it could convey meaning. The way I used it was to help convey meaning of this journey. So that's the takeaway I would like my students to have. So to edit this alt text, I can select the image and select the image options. And then I actually want to put in a good alternative text description. So I could say, the journey to financial literacy starts by identifying your needs versus wants, and then learning strategies for success. And I would keep going until I kind of touched base on these different items throughout that journey. Now, sometimes images are a little harder to do alt text. One of my favorite resources to try is Claude. Claude.ai is a awesome little AI generator that you can even put images. So just to give you an idea of what it can do, I used Claude quite a bit when I was designing a math class that had graphs, parabolas, things like that, where it had to identify the vertex and different points. So for today's purpose, I'm just going to add that little graphic again, and I'm going to ask Claude, can you help provide alt text for the image attached? I'm going to upload it. And it gives me some information. Now, this goes back to that human intervention. I need to read this and see if it conveys the message I want to convey to my student. So it says an illustrated roadmap. Maybe I don't need to say it's an illustration. I could say the roadmap to financial literacy is a winding road that connects several key financial concepts. And then it kind of goes through the different items. So this might be a great starting point. I found it to be really beneficial for, like I said, technical things like graphs. For example, if a student is taking an assessment online and there is a graph that they have to interpret to answer a question, that alt text has to be spot on. It has to have each point that's identified. It has to have, is the parabola opening up, opening down? Is there a minimum or a maximum? So I found Claude to be a really useful free tool. You do have to create a free account, and it eventually, you tap out throughout the day, right? Just like with ChatGPT, it kind of throttles you. But I found Claude to be a really great resource for me. So whenever we're inserting images, just to recap, we're always going to want to use our insert image. We're going to upload it from our computer, and that is where we're going to put the alt text. We can always edit the alt text by selecting the image and selecting the little image options right here. So I didn't finish this one for the sake of time, but say I'm ready to submit this, I'm ready to publish, I'm always going to run my accessibility checker to make sure that all my checks and balances are done. Something that Laura pointed out earlier was about the color contrast. Brightspace cannot.
Real quick, before you go on to the color contrast, real quick, I wanted to underline something that you said, but I wanted to reiterate it to make sure that it stood out to everyone. Jenna said, when you insert the image, you are inserting an image from your computer, you're uploading. Now, the D2L editor here will let you paste in images that you find, many images. It will let you paste them in there. However, there are issues with that could happen when courses are copied or if that image goes away from the internet. So what happens when you copy and paste that image into this editor, it preserves the link to the original image. It doesn't really put that image in your course. So if that image ever disappears from the internet, wherever it is, wherever it lives, it will break inside of your course. So the best practice method to do is to download the image and upload it to your course, not copy and paste. And also to cite it appropriately. And we talked about that in other lunch and learns. But I did want to put that out there. I also just thought it was really cute and adorable that when Jenna was talking to Claude, she said, can you please provide alt text for here? Just in case things go Terminator style, she's on the good side of the computers because she spoke politely to them. So I like that too. So I just want to put that out there.
Thanks, Dr. Thompson. That is such a great call out about not copying and pasting. And I'll admit that's things I had done several years ago when I was adjuncting here too. I didn't know, right? We don't know what we don't know. So whenever we're putting an image in, we always are going to use the insert image icon. As for the color contrast, Brightspace does not check the color contrast of images and things like that we put into our things. If you design images, say in Canva, there is actually a color contrast checker built in that you can use. If you're designing in other platforms, you can use, there's different WebAIM resources for color contrast checkers, but Brightspace does check the contrast for text. So for example, say I'm having fun and I want to change this word content to hot pink. When I do the accessibility checker, it's going to flag it as being inaccessible. It doesn't necessarily tell me what to do to fix it. And that's to Laura's point. But at least I know I have to fix it. So that's where you might go to WebAIM and play with the slider to find a slightly darker shade that meets the accessibility requirements. That is always an option to do so. So to recap what I was able to show you today in Brightspace is we're always going to want to start with one of our HTML templates. We want to consider, we do want to use our headings, and we want to be considerate of our hierarchy of those headings. That will be caught through the accessibility checker. We also want to make sure we're using descriptive links that give context to our students. And we talked about the differentiating between decorative and images that need alt text. And it really does boil down to context of that picture and the context of the information surrounding it. And finally, the little bright space accessibility checker, I'm going to go ahead and change this. Maybe if I make it bold, let's see if that worked. Nope, still not going to work. So how about I'm going to make, I'm going to choose a darker pink. Let's see if that one worked. And it did. So playing around with the colors until it works for you is one of the many, many strategies we've had here. We are excited for next week. We will dive into a few more things, but this was just the recap of what I was able to share with you during the demo. And I actually wanted to pause. Kathy, the way I inserted the images, is that the same workflow you typically use, or was that different?
No, I think that was my problem.
No, and I actually, someone in CCIT had the recommendation too, because it's confusing to think about, are we uploading something or are we inserting an image? Like that's just a thought process. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Kathy.
Just a question.
Yeah.
So when you use the image icon and you put it in a file, say to unit 2, so then when you need to use that image again, how do you find it?
That's a really great question. Let me come back over on my screen. So I'm going to just put some white space, insert image from course offering files and unit 2, and I
Okay,
can insert it again. This
okay,
organization, and actually, this will be highlighted something about course files in the upcoming newsletter. That's going to discuss how to help streamline your file so it makes it easier to locate things. So to your point, Kathy, say if I want to use this megaphone throughout my course, I might want a separate file that says icons. So they're easy for me to go look in that folder and I can keep utilizing it throughout the course. That was a really good question. Thank
okay,
you.
thanks.
Yeah. All right, Laura, I'm going to hand it over to you as we finish up today.
All right. And if you want to change your screen.
Oh, lo
Great.
siento. Thank you. Thank you.
And we're working on looking at, we have our reflection, our resources. And again, Jenna, if you can pop in the digital accessibility link, if you have that ready, let's chat. Was there something new that you learned today? Was there something you saw that you said, oh,
Well, I already learned how to insert an image.
excellent.
So lots
That's
of things. I have a whole notebook of things that I've written down here.
terrific.
Yeah. I think,
Anything else? I saw Alice, there was something earlier today. I just saw your eyebrows. They went up when Jenna did something, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I just remember looking and you're like, oh, because it was something new, I thought.
ooh,
Oh,
she just put it in the chat.
oh, there it is. Yes, excellent. And D2L's accessibility checker won't address color contrast issues for text within an image. And Alice remarked that it's okay to not describe every image. It's okay if it's decorative. It is okay. But again, be discerning. Make sure if it has educational purpose, you have to describe it. There's no choice there. Excellent. All right. And what is something you'd like to learn more about? There's a part 2 to this session, and there's an outline for it, but it's flexible that if there's something that you want to learn more about, we can add that to the part 2. Is there anything you can think of? You can, more about video captioning. Anything else you can think of? Joelle, yes.
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Wonderful. So I'm new to Deltec. So hello, everybody. I
Welcome.
just got a camera, so I was able to jump on. I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to be a part of this conversation. I definitely learned a lot that I'm going to start to implement. And I would like to come back to the next session as well. I also wanted to highlight that I love the language and the way that you support each other. through your language throughout conversation. I like to be a strength spotter, and I feel like you all do that really well with each other. So I also wanted to mention that. But yes, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you.
Joining. I know we know that time's a hot commodity, right? So thank you for taking the time to join for our Lunch and Learn, guys. It really does mean a lot to us, more than you know.
It's terrific. And if you think of anything in the meantime, you can email myself or Jenna and tell us, hey, please make sure you talk about blah, blah, whatever blah, blah is. And again, just to help reinforce or restate the resources that are available for you, we do have the digital accessibility reference guide that Jenna popped the link into. There's a course, IDTG 19, that you can take for credits. We have a digital accessibility micro-credentialing course. So it's a short self-paced course and you get a badge. And then we also have some professional learning opportunities. We have lunch and learn sessions, and we also have in the newsletter for the rest of this school year, we're going to have accessibility challenges in an accessibility corner in the newsletter.
So before we go, we did already drop in the chat the digital accessibility reference guide. There is some information about the video captioning in there as well if you'd like to take a sneak peek. And I'm also going to highlight in G19 if you've not taken that course yet. And Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the projects at the end is you actually will record a video and edit the captioning to make sure that they're accurate. Is that right, Jason? It's still part of that course. And it's such a great practice. And we're actually, even as a department, talking about different workflows for that, to be transparent with you. Christina, who's on with us, she's one of our ed techs. She is actually working on some of that in relation to screencasts and ways to caption those so faculty have some ideas and solutions. So we're having these conversations too. And we hope that you're able to come back and join us. Next Tuesday, we actually have Jason presenting on hyperskill. If you have not been able to see hyperskill in action, please come join this session. It has so many awesome resources and just almost like the sky's the limit. That sounds so cliche, but it is very true. Jason has a really good process and it's a really immersive experience. So if you're able to join us, please do. We will also record it. Then on March 4th, we're going to continue with the accessible course design part 2 and finish out the accessibility component of Lunch and Learn for the spring by creating our inclusive classroom cultures, because that is our whole goal, right? To support all of our students and make them feel safe, invited, and able to succeed. If you have time before you go, we would love for you to complete our CCIT workshop survey. We really do read every response. It is an anonymous survey, but it helps us make sure that we're making meaningful learning experiences for you as faculty so we can help you, and which in turn supports our students. So you're welcome to hang around if you have any questions for Laura and I, but thank you again for taking the time to spend your lunch with us, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.